Hi. The Human Rights Campaign recently began a campaign for constituents to meet with their elected representatives, which they call No Excuses. It's found at the website www.noexcuses.hrc.org. As a local volunteer in Ohio, I was asked to meet with Senator George Voinovich, the Republican senator from Ohio. The following is the speech that I plan to deliver to him in his office Monday, August 31st. I would first like very much to thank you for voting for the Matthew Shepard Local Law Enforcement Hate Crimes Prevention Act, S909. I can vividly recall where I was in 1998 when I found myself reading the account of Mr. Shepard's torture and death because of his sexual orientation, and ultimately facing the very real possibility that I could face death too, solely based on an arbitrary characteristic. I was 20 years old at the time, and had only just recently come to terms with who I was as a sexual being. I was about halfway through my college career and working full-time. It was a different time then than it is today, to be young and gay in America. In my youth, we had no Ellen DeGeneres or T.R. Knight, and no one spoke for our causes or to protect us. Today, though, it is a different landscape for many of the maligned social groups from my youth. Because of courageous politicians such as yourself, injustice can no longer flourish. It was a welcome relief to find that you sponsored legislation that made targeting an individual or individuals on the basis of actual or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability a federal hate crime. There is, though, another form of discrimination that occurs in America, and it targets the business world precisely at a time when economic uncertainty is at its gravest. At present, 12 states and the District of Columbia protect individuals in their workplaces from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, while an additional 9 states protect individuals from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation alone. That means that as of this moment, 42% of the states protect their most valuable economic commodities, their workers, from arbitrary discrimination based on orientation and identity, while 24% of the states provide protection based on orientation. Yet as of February 2009, 423, or 85%, of the Fortune 500 companies banned discrimination based on sexual orientation, and 176, or 35%, banned discrimination based on orientation and identity. Some of the leading companies that support fairness in the workplace and have stated support for federal legislation banning discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity include Bank of America, Best Buy, BP America, Cisco Systems, Clear Channel Communications, Coca-Cola, Dell, General Mills, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, Miller Coors Brewing, Nationwide, headquartered in Columbus, NCR, headquartered in Dayton, and Time Warner. It is unfathomable that corporate America would extend greater benefits than the law allows unless it recognized that qualified individuals should not be discriminated against based on characteristics unrelated to their job. In a study published in 2001 by the Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law, reports of discrimination based on sexual orientation were found to be as prevalent as reports based on gender and race. It is, therefore, time for Congress to act to restore the civil rights of a group of people who are clearly being discriminated against. As the economy continues to teeter on the precipice of disaster, can we really afford to discriminate against a qualified person based solely on characteristics unrelated to their job? In a study published by Peter D. Hart Research Associates, Inc. in 2007, 58% of polled Americans favor workplace protections for LGBT employees. Americans and American companies favor protections to promote diversity in the workplace. Diversity in the workplace attracts the most qualified and simply the best worker for a particular job, regardless of other characteristics. It is a policy that makes sound business sense. The Constitution guarantees both equal protection under the law and due process for the individual. Only through the enactment of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, H.R. 3017, can we ensure that such constitutional concepts have the force of law in the workplace. We need this bill to pass more than ever. Our economy needs it, and social justice demands that all of America's workers be protected equally under the law. I speak most especially about the need to enact this legislation on the basis of social justice, because as a Roman Catholic, I believe that the Catholic Church has consistently spoken about the rights of the worker and the responsibilities of the state and the employer. The state has a clear duty to promote social justice through the protection of rights. Congress, as the elected representative body of the people, has responded when it has found that people were not being hired or promoted for unfair or arbitrary reasons, such as race, gender, or disability. Congress has restored civil liberties by ensuring that arbitrary considerations do not determine access to employment. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, has support from both the Democratic and Republican parties, and the Senate version is co-sponsored by no less than 38 members of that august body, including the late Senator Ted Kennedy and Senators Susan Collins, Olympia Snowe, and Chris Dodd. The burden added to the taxpayers would additionally be minimal, as the Congressional Budget Office estimated in 2002 that complaints filed with the EEOC would rise only between 5 and 7%, based on adding sexual orientation and gender identity protections to workplace discrimination bans. Furthermore, this bill gives religious organizations the ability to opt out of the discrimination ban and does not cover companies with fewer than 15 employees. It does not set up a quota system, nor does it require companies to make provisions to hire based on sexual orientation or gender identity. I would respectfully ask you to consider co-sponsoring the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or to pledge your support for this bill when it comes to a floor vote in the U.S. Senate. As a watchdog of the fiscal policies of the federal government, I urge you to consider the effect that failing to pass this law will undoubtedly have on our economy. Qualified, able workers unable to secure jobs because of a characteristic that has no bearing on the job for which they have applied. In the 11 years that it has taken to pass a hate crimes bill since the torture and death of a young man who held so much promise, our culture, our ideas about sex and sexuality, and our values have progressed and evolved. There is a strong momentum pushing for equality for all Americans, based not solely on orientation, but on all dimensions of our intrinsic being. In the final analysis of history, as you look to retire from your position from the U.S. Senate, do you want to have a legacy such as your honorable peers, Strom Thurmond and Byrd, who stood against the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Would you wish to be immortalized with Governor Wallace with the epitaph, "Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever"? Surely, even the most unobservant student of history can see the parallel between the passage of landmark civil rights legislation in the 1960s and today's focus on ensuring that orientation and gender identity are tolerated and viewed as equal under the law. I beg you to not let your legacy or the reputation of the great state of Ohio be a force of division, but to instead promote unity, compassion, and tolerance for all Americans. I leave you, Senator, with a quote from Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan in his dissenting opinion in Plessy v. Ferguson. In view of the Constitution, in the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior, dominant, ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind, and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. In respect of civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law. The humblest is the peer of the most powerful. Thank you for watching.